This production is brought to you by Tangible Communications and No Filter Editing. My Father's Riddle. A novel. Written by Brad Sebastian and edited by Elizabeth Crook. Audio production by Brad Sebastian and Tangible Communications. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved.
Chapter 1. Palpable Anxiety. Washington, D.C. 2033.
Silence surrounded Aldous. Save the congressional intern at the front of the distinguished private rail cart, Aldous sat alone with his thoughts. The world awaited those thoughts. The tunnels in the underbelly of Washington, D.C. form a semi-private rail system that allowed high-powered D.C. lawmakers and lobbyists to move around town, avoiding street-level congestion. Notably different from the massive, chaotic labyrinth of steel you might find underneath New York or London, the DC system moved a small number of privileged passengers in slow-moving carts that resembled theme park rides more than big city high-speed mass transit. As it had been arranged, the tunnels were empty this afternoon. The cart began its short trip to the U.S. Capitol building with a click and a clack as the steel wheels rolled past the first section of track. The cart methodically made its way past the White House stop and clicked through the normally tourist-heavy Lincoln Memorial platform. The tunnels were silent. The city is vacant. The steel wheels whispered to unresponsive platforms. Click, clack, click, clack. The intern felt awkward at the front of the cart. He looked awkward. His name was Carl. He stared at Aldous as though he were a ghost. Click, clack. It was agreed upon months prior to Aldous's arrival in Washington that he would take the tunnel rail system unescorted from Senator Williamson's office across town to the Capitol building for what had been dubbed the Aldous Solution. Senator Williamson, the president, and the White House press team thought it best to not give the impression of coloring Aldous's thoughts en route to the most anticipated speech in human history. The press corps would take note of every detail. He wasn't entirely unescorted. There was Carl. The senator figured young Carl could accompany him on the quick ride from his Senate office building to the Capitol, where an unprecedented joint session of Congress, the court justices, foreign heads of state, and every media outlet on the planet awaited his every word. A click, clack, click, clack. Carl was not prepared for this. He could not have anticipated that he would be on a cart with Aldous Keneally. The White House press team chose not to tell him until moments before he was directed to step on the cart with Aldous. No need to risk a security breach. Click, click, clack, clack. The cart sped forward. How did you get this job? It sounded like small talk. Aldous was genuinely interested. Carl was not expecting small talk. Sir? Carl fidgeted. This job, I'm sorry, sir. Carl pulled at his collar. He was sweating. Hey, bud, Aldous said. Relax. He pointed to the seat across from him. Have a seat. You look like you need a second to just breathe. Carl flinched again. I don't think I'm supposed to talk. What's your name? Aldous asked. Carl. It's a pleasure to meet you, Carl. I'm Aldous. Aldous extended his hand. Carl turned a little pale. Yes, sir. I'm Carl. I know who you are, Mr. Keneally. Aldous laughed quietly, scratching at his weathered grey beard. The sun-weathered cracks across his face guarded secret chapters to a story that would be told indefinitely long after the manuscript was completed. You mentioned that, Carl. Try and relax, man. I'm the one that has to give a speech to the world. You're just my chaperone, Carl. Carl was a teenager. Aldous Keneally was Aldous Keneally. Carl's eyes shot nervously above the rail cart as it swayed gently side to side. Click, clack, clack, click. Seriously, just take a deep breath, Aldous said. Carl hesitated. He averted his eyes to the ground. Aldous revisited the small talk to try and put his fellow passenger's mind at ease. So, Carl, how did you end up as an intern for Senator Williamson? Carl nodded. He started to feel a little more comfortable. Aldous had a way about him. Well, my father is the Attorney General of Tennessee, Carl said. He and Senator Williamson were roommates at Vanderbilt Law. This is just a summer job that was arranged for me. I see. Did you grow up in Tennessee? Aldous asked. Yes, sir. Mr. Keneally, Memphis, sir. Click, clack, click, clack. The cart turned sharply on its rails on a curve. Creak, click, clack. Aldous pressed forward with the small talk. Call me Aldous, he said. Let's talk pork ribs. Do you like the dry ribs or wet ribs? I'm sorry, sir. Barbecue ribs. Do you like the dry rub or the saucy ones? And please, no need to call me sir. That's a little formal. Oh, okay. My father does a dry rub, sir. Call me Aldous. Sorry, sir. I mean Aldous, sorry. Carl bit his lip with a fidget. My father does a dry rub. It's the best in Tennessee. Click, clack. Aldous tilted his head. Why do you suppose that is, Carl? Carl took a breath to regain his composure. Aldous grinned while gesturing with a friendly two-finger wave. He was trying to alleviate Carl's palpable anxiety. It's none of my business, really, Aldous said. Just curious. Why a dry rub? Why not the sauce? The casual topic wasn't making any sense to Carl. Mr. Aldous, sir? Aldous chuckled. What's up, Carl? A long pause. Click, clack. Do you have all the answers, like they say, like Senator Williamson says you do? Nope, Aldous said. I do not, actually. Carl looked a little lost. But Mr. Aldous, just call me Aldous. Click, clack, click, clack. But you are here to speak to the world, Carl said. To help us. This is where we are going. Right now. I do love some messy sauced pork ribs. Aldous smiled. Nothing against the dry rub, though. The cart approached the landing at the Capitol building. Chaos approached. A 2-foot passage lane formed by shoulder-to-shoulder Secret Service personnel held back giant hordes of reporters, photographers, and protesters. The flashes were blinding. The mob was thunderous. Overhead, dozens of floating camera drones jockeyed for space above the cramped landing. Aldous and Carl's barbecue talk time was dwindling as the cart approached this carnival at the Capitol Hill stop. Carl looked at the mob, then swung his head back to Aldous. Then another perplexed double take. What are you going to tell them? He asked. That you don't have the answers. Click, clack, click. The cart slowed, a grin. Why do you suppose your father does the dry ribs, Carl? What? Carl's eyes dilated at the absurdly timed question. Click, clack. The crowd grew nearby. I love me some sloppy pork ribs. Aldous nodded. He elevated his voice over the mob they approached. You suppose your father would ever do a wet rib recipe? The cart approached the platform. Secret Service agents sprang forward. Would he ever do a wet rib sauce? Aldous asked, as he started off towards the cart door. The Secret Service agents started to usher him off. He stopped them with the firm gesture of a palm. Give me just 1 second, gentlemen, he said to the huddle of approaching suits. Carl and I are talking. The humanity of cameras, voices, light, and sound overwhelmed. Carl went from pale to red. Carl, he was not prepared for this. Carl was a teenager. Aldous shouted back over the white noise of the hoarding mass. A wet rib sauce? He asked again over his shoulder. Would you guys try it? Never, sir, Carl yelled across the cart. My great pappy's dry rub is the best. Aldous got ushered off by the agents. Sir! Sir! One of the agents yelled. Follow me, and Agent Anderson through the crowd. Aldous looked back at Carl. Carl, he looked perplexed and scared. Aldous never wanted to scare anyone. He broke away from the throng of suits and hopped right back onto the cart. He took a knee in front of Carl with a fraternal shoulder slap. He grabbed him by the shoulders and looked him in the eye. Hey man, he said in fatherly tone. Don't be scared, but I don't have all the answers. Otherwise, why would I be asking you about Memphis barbecue? I don't get it. Carl's voice shivered behind an emerging smile. Aldous whispered into Carl's ear, his hand cupped over his mouth to block out the mob. Neither do I.
I hope you enjoyed this preview of the soon-to-be-released novel, My Father's Riddle, by Brad Sebastian. Edited by Elizabeth Crook. To learn more, visit nofilterediting.com. That's nofilterediting.com.